With the Alfawise Mini here, I once again have another pair of truly wireless earphones, and I'm definitely gonna review even more so in the future, just because I can't get enough of this so damn convenient form factor. These here, by the way, are around $30, $25 at the moment on GearBest. The question now though is if they can dethrone my current budget recommendation, the Blitzwolf FY2. I mean, at least on paper it seems that they offer the better value, but if it's just therefore also generally the better purchase, that's what I want to let you know in the next few minutes. But before that, I want to let you know why I think that value is better. Well, because there's just more in the box, like for example this carrying pouch, which we could store the charging case in. But this is not just a typical charging case. I mean, it's obvious, this is bigger, heavier, like the normal ones. But this is also a power bank. I mean, as you can see here, charging LED, and it's actually quite thin, so it won't take up that much space in your pants. And if your phone is about to die, this maybe won't charge your phone in the fastest way, and maybe not even fully. But if you want to save your day with what's in your pants already, this might be it. About the tips, I have to say, these are a little bit smaller than the typical smallest ones, so that's why I'm going to call those XS, and then we get two bigger ones. Generally, I have to say they are quite nice and soft, they have a good appearance, and they are quite comfortable. Generally, the earphones themselves, I have to say, are maybe a tad little bigger than some other ones out there. Not by much, as you can see here, but that's just that. Otherwise, we can see a little bit of a red status LED. It's also supposed to blink blue, at least what I've seen on pictures. I've never seen that in reality. There's also obviously a microphone, nice little plastic, and generally they feel quite good. What I like about the case is that these store in quite safely, so they definitely won't fall out. And the build quality of their charging case is also actually pretty good. It is sweat proof, at least the earphones are. And I would say, let's just talk about the general comfort here, because here I have to say what I like is first of all the case that these are interchangeable, vice versa. You could lose the left one in your ear, in the right ear, and vice versa, so they don't really particularly have a left and right, which is pretty nice to see. But more so even, I have to say the comfort is really good, especially on my right ear. It's so subtle that I actually could forget this in my ear. In my left ear, which is a little bit on the auto side, maybe not quite so much. And one thing that I had to hear today twice is that I look like Shrek and I should actually take these one out. But honestly, I don't really care as long as they are so comfortable, they have a secure fit in, so that's just that. About the isolation, it's actually a little bit stronger than general, so it muffled a little bit more in terms of the higher end, so hearing people with these in is a little bit harder, but at least therefore the isolation is also better. About the controls and how easy are they to power, I would say this. They don't play super loud. I would say normal loud for me, maybe not quite enough, but I would say for 95% of all the people, this should be fine. I had some issues with my OnePlus 5T when I used the equalizer, then they were generally noticeably quieter for some reason, and I needed to repair them to gain full volume again. So I'm not quite sure why that was the case, but generally it shouldn't be an issue. I guess that was more of a OnePlus 5T thing. About the controls, it works like this. One click on each side is for pause and play. If you double tap, it's for the next track. If you press a little bit longer, then it opens the voice assistant. If you press really long, it turns them off. There is no volume control, obviously, that's still a thing. And there is also, unfortunately, at this price range, just no aptX, which means it will sound a little bit compressed. When it comes to the delay, therefore also it is there. It is visible, not a real issue, but if you want to watch movies for a longer period of time, I would say maybe try some with aptX if you can find some, but at that price point this will be actually pretty hard. About the white noise though, very positive thing to say, it's so quiet that I would say it's pretty much not there, so that's a good thing. What is also good is that they allow for mono pairing, so you can use both, you can use either one, and there is no really a master, so sometimes pairing them back just doesn't happen on its own, but not a big thing. The battery about good for 3.5 to 3 hours and 40, which is actually 1 hour more than stated, so that's definitely good. About the soundstage, it's not really huge. It's, I would actually say, a little bit on the smaller side. I don't really want to call them claustrophobic because the soundstage itself is actually quite coherent. It's just not big and definitely not open or eerie, so pretty typical what you generally get these days. About the sound signature, it's definitely a little bit on the bass boosted side, but actually only what you might think at first, because at first I thought a lot of bass completely over-drowning and out-drowning the mids and the highs, but I actually noticed after hearing them for longer and longer that it's just the kind of recessed highs which are a little bit muffled that make it appear that the bass is more there than it is. Because those highs, I have to say, are a little bit muffled. I mean, it's still okay for mainstream and it's still better than anything that you get in your box, box, and after a while of listening to it, you get accustomed to that. But if you are a fan of clarity, of highs and so on, this is not quite what you will get. But therefore, long-term friendly, they are actually a little bit on the warmer, but definitely very smoother side. So definitely actually quite nice and balanced for what they do. The bass feels, like I said, a little bit at first, a little bit more dominant. That's because of the highs, which brings me to things like the bass. I mean, I have to say, in general, it does an actually quite nice job. I mean, it's a pretty average bass at this price point, but it has a strong presence. I mean, it's a little bit more thumpy than it is maybe punchy. There is not too much sub bass, and generally, like I said, it feels a little bit overwhelming. It seems to kind of bleed a little bit into the mids, but that's actually what it just seems like at first. Because it's generally actually really nice and generally quite good of a bass. The mids, I would say, they are a little bit unspectacular because of those highs they can really shine. They actually allow for a good separation of the sound. They are totally fine, I have to say, and therefore I just have to mention that my main issue here are the highs, because there is not much clarity, there's not any openness or airiness, they sound a little bit muffled, there is not really much extension, and therefore I really can't even call it a roll-off, because they can't roll off if they never rolled on, which sounds off. And obviously, and I would almost say you need to EQ them, but you can't really improve much with the EQ, because some headphones just work better with EQing, some don't, because these didn't help, because it felt like you have more highs, but you didn't get the clarity or openness, which is something that the longer you listen to, you get more used to, that it just sounds not that open, not that airy, but you will get used to them, and then I've actually say they sound quite nice and balanced. I mean, therefore, not really any particular strengths in any sound genre, because metal works actually quite good, just about as metal and ballads and everything pretty much the same way. Podcasts work also, they are a little bit more on the muffled, dull side with a little bit more bass, but generally still actually quite good, which leads me to the alternatives. The FY2 that I mentioned beforehand from Blitzwolf, I have to say I personally still prefer a little bit more, just because they have that little bit more clarity. But what I've also noticed, compared to these, once you get used to them, they actually sound a little bit thinner. The bass is actually a little bit better here in terms of quality, and also the mids. But with those kind of recessed highs, therefore I still lean towards the Blitzwolf, which just sound better. But I guess a lot of more mainstream people who want more of a balance and don't really need that much highs will maybe like these even more. So price-wise, they're pretty much similar. And then you get the power bank, which is quite handy, even though it's just generally a little bit harder to carry around with you. Then the Xiaomi AirDots, I would say, definitely a little bit more balanced sounded, so a little bit mainstream with just, after all, more highs. And they though cost about twice as much, have some issues with touch controls and so, which I don't like so much, because these here have like proper buttons which are kind of hidden. You hear them, you get a tactile feedback. I just prefer that at the end of the day. About the FYE4, which I didn't really review all that positively, I still have to say, even in terms of sound, I prefer these, because the FYE4 didn't really have highs either, but they didn't have nearly as good as of a bass and mids like these, so these definitely win over, especially at that price point, which leads me to the pros. The comfort is absolutely great, especially in my right ear, which is the normal ear. I can't completely forget them. They have a good isolation. The power bank is included. Mono mode works quite easy. And once I actually noticed that these cost just about $25, I actually thought they cost like $60 for some reason at first. My opinion on the value is just way better now. Now about the cons though, we have to talk about these. Well, big and heavy charging case. The earphones, like I said, Shrek-like, they stick out after all quite a lot. I don't really care that much about it, but if the appearance is quite important for you, that's that. Also, the recessed muffled highs are my actual main issue. So I would say these are not for anyone who wants something with a lot of clarity, openness, with something of more audiophile balanced sound. But these are for people who want a really nice actual bass with quite nice mids and don't really care so much about clarity, openness and highs, because they want a quite good coherent experience. Because if you get used to this sound, you will actually notice that the qualities of those general typical traits are actually pretty nice, besides the highs, which actually rhymes. So personally, I would still prefer the FY2, but for mainstream people who are more used to something more bass heavy or more dominant, these might work out quite good. Okay, that's that. Until next time, bye.